Stephen Adjumo was a man of wealth, grace, and poise. From the outside, his life appeared to be the epitome of success. As a successful entrepreneur based in Lagos, he had built a fortune that allowed him to live a life free from financial worries. His wealth was not just in his bank account but also in his lifestyle: lavish homes, expensive cars, and a reputation that commanded respect in social and business circles. But beyond the material riches, Stephen seemed to have it all. He was engaged to Zainab, a woman whose beauty was as striking as her intelligence. Zainab was not just a pretty face. She was well educated, ambitious, and came from a family that was equally respected and wealthy. Together, they were the picture of a perfect couple, admired by many and envied by some. Their families saw their union as the ideal match, a blending of two powerful, well-off families. Yet, while everything seemed flawless on the surface, Stephen couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Beneath the gleaming exterior of his life, cracks were beginning to form, hinting at deeper issues that even all the wealth in the world couldn't fix. As their wedding day approached, Zainab's temper began to flare more frequently. At first, Stephen didn't think much of it. Wedding planning was known to be stressful, and he assumed that the pressures of organizing such a significant event were taking a toll on Zainab. She was meticulous, wanting every detail to be perfect, and her high standards often led to tension. But as the days turned into weeks, Stephen noticed a shift in Zainab's behavior that couldn't be ignored. What started as occasional irritability escalated into constant nagging and frustration. Zainab began to pick fights over the smallest things: if Stephen was late coming home, if he forgot to mention something about the wedding plans, or even if he didn't answer her calls promptly. The warmth and affection that once characterized their relationship seemed to be fading, replaced by arguments and accusations. Stephen found himself walking on eggshells around her, trying to avoid anything that might trigger her temper. But no matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to satisfy her. Zainab's sharp words and frequent outbursts began to weigh heavily on him, causing him to question whether this was the life he wanted. What he once thought was pre-wedding stress now seemed like a glimpse into a future he wasn't sure he could handle. The tension weighed heavily on Stephen. For a man who valued peace above all else, the constant turmoil at home was unbearable. His house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a place of confrontation and unease. Each day, he dreaded coming home, knowing that another argument with Zainab was likely waiting for him. He longed for the tranquility that had once filled his life, but it seemed to be slipping further and further away. Desperate for some relief, Stephen found solace in an unexpected place, a small, unassuming restaurant tucked away in the bustling neighborhood of Surulere. It wasn't a fancy place, nothing like the upscale restaurants he usually frequented, but that was precisely why he was drawn to it. The ambience was simple, warm, and inviting, a stark contrast to the tension that awaited him at home. The food was modest, yet there was a comfort in its simplicity. It was there, in this little haven, that Stephen met Dara. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met before. As a server at the restaurant, Dara was soft-spoken, with a calm demeanor that instantly put him at ease. She had a quiet strength about her, a presence that was both soothing and reassuring, and Stephen found himself returning to the restaurant more often, seeking out her company as much as the peaceful atmosphere. Dara wasn't like Zainab. From the moment Stephen met her, he noticed the stark contrast between the two women. Where Zainab was fiery and demanding, Dara was calm and understanding. She had a natural warmth that made Stephen feel at ease in her presence. Dara wasn't wealthy or glamorous like Zainab. She worked as a server at the restaurant, earning a modest living. But she had dreams, big dreams. She talked about how she wanted to start her own catering business one day, to bring joy to others through her love of cooking. There was a sincerity in her eyes and a quiet determination in her voice that Stephen found incredibly refreshing. Unlike Zainab, who often pressured him to meet her expectations, Dara never judged or criticized. Instead, she listened. Whenever Stephen talked about his frustrations with Zainab, the arguments, and the growing sense of unease he felt, Dara offered gentle, thoughtful advice. "Marriage is not just about love, it's about peace too," she would say. Her words resonated with Stephen in a way that nothing else had. Dara made him realize that the peace he longed for wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. With each conversation, Stephen found himself opening up to Dara more and more, confiding in her in ways he hadn't done with anyone else. Stephen knew she was right. Each time he left the restaurant after talking with Dara, he felt as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Her words echoed in his mind long after their conversations ended. He began to question everything about his relationship with Zainab. Was he truly in love with her, or was he simply following a path that had been laid out for him? The more he thought about it, the more uncertain he became. Zainab's impatience only grew as the wedding day approached. She couldn't understand why Stephen seemed to be pulling away, becoming more distant with each passing day. When she confronted him about it, her anger flared even more, leading to explosive arguments that left Stephen feeling drained and defeated. The more she pushed, the further he withdrew. Zainab was oblivious to the fact that her temper was driving a wedge between them, a wedge that was growing wider by the day. She was so focused on the wedding and the future she had envisioned that she failed to see what was happening right in front of her. Stephen, on the other hand, couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that filled him whenever he thought about their upcoming marriage. The idea of spending his life in constant conflict, with no peace to be found, was something he could no longer accept. 2 weeks before their wedding, Stephen made a decision that shocked both their families. After much contemplation, he realized that he could not go through with the marriage. The pressure had become unbearable, and the thought of spending a lifetime with someone who constantly brought turmoil into his life was more than he could bear. When he told Zainab that he was calling off the wedding, her reaction was explosive. She was furious, her anger fueled by a mixture of shock, betrayal, and disbelief. She couldn't fathom how Stephen could make such a decision so close to their wedding day. Zainab begged him to reconsider, her desperation evident as she promised to change, to work on her temper, and to do whatever it took to make their relationship work. But Stephen had reached his limit. He was no longer willing to sacrifice his peace of mind for the sake of a relationship that was clearly broken. "I can't marry someone who doesn't bring me peace," he said, his voice firm and resolute. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Stephen's decision wasn't just about Zainab's temper, it was about reclaiming his life, his happiness, and his sense of peace. The wedding was called off, and while the decision was difficult, Stephen knew it was the right one. It was a choice that would lead him down a different path, one where peace, not conflict, would be at the center of his life. After the breakup, Stephen continued visiting the restaurant. It became his sanctuary, a place where he could find solace and clarity away from the chaos that had taken over his life. His conversations with Dara grew deeper and more personal. They no longer talked just about Zainab and the issues that had led to the breakup. They talked about life, dreams, and the future. Dara had a way of listening that made Stephen feel heard, truly heard, in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. She offered gentle advice without judgment, always encouraging him to follow his heart and seek what made him happy. Stephen found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the peace she brought him, it was about the kindness and understanding she showed. Dara was the opposite of everything he had been accustomed to with Zainab, and it was this difference that captivated him. Over time, their friendship blossomed into something more. There was a quiet intimacy in their interactions, a mutual respect and affection that grew stronger with each passing day. Stephen began to realize that what he felt for Dara was more than just gratitude for her support. It was something deeper, something that had the potential to change his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. Their friendship blossomed, and soon Stephen realized that his feelings for Dara were much deeper than he had thought. The more time he spent with her, the more he recognized that what they shared was something special, something rare. It wasn't just about the peace she brought into his life. It was about the connection they had, a bond built on understanding, respect, and genuine care for each other. One evening, after the restaurant had closed and the staff had gone home, Stephen and Dara found themselves alone. The dim lighting and quiet atmosphere added a layer of intimacy to the moment as they sat together at one of the corner tables. Stephen looked at Dara with a seriousness she hadn't seen before, his voice soft yet filled with emotion. "Dara," he began softly, his eyes holding hers with a sincerity that made her heart skip a beat. "I've found something with you that I didn't even know I was missing. Peace, happiness, you make me feel at home." His voice trembled slightly, revealing the depth of his feelings. For so long, he had been searching for something he couldn't quite define, and now, sitting across from Dara, he realized that she was what he had been looking for all along. Dara's eyes widened as Stephen continued. "I think I've fallen in love with you. You're the calm in my storm, and I don't want to lose that." The words hung in the air between them, full of promise and vulnerability. For a moment, Dara was speechless. She had always cared for Stephen, but she never imagined he would feel the same way. Her heart swelled with emotion, and a soft smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Stephen," she said gently, "I've grown fond of you too. I didn't expect this, but it feels right. You make me feel seen, valued, and understood. That's rare." Their connection deepened that evening, and from that point on, their relationship blossomed into something beautiful. They took things slowly, savoring every moment together. Unlike his rushed engagement with Zainab, Stephen wanted to be sure this time. He didn't want to repeat past mistakes. With Dara, he felt a sense of calm that he had never experienced before. She brought balance to his life, grounding him in ways that his wealth and status never could. Eventually, their relationship grew into a love that was undeniable. They supported each other's dreams, with Stephen encouraging Dara to pursue her catering business and Dara providing him with the emotional stability he had longed for. Their bond wasn't built on material wealth or social status. It was built on mutual respect, understanding, and love. When the time was right, Stephen proposed to Dara, not with an extravagant gesture, but with a heartfelt promise of a future filled with peace and happiness. They married in a simple yet beautiful ceremony surrounded by close family and friends. It wasn't the grand event that his wedding to Zainab would have been, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Stephen had finally found his peace, not in the wealth that surrounded him, but in the arms of the woman who brought calm and happiness into his life. And as he looked at Dara, standing by his side on their wedding day, he knew that this feeling of contentment and love, was the greatest fortune of all.